The interviews lasted days. You'd never seen such a queue as formed outside the palace gates. All the fine young men of the land turned up, full of brave talk and dressed in their finery, but none of them could win the princess. All the boys could strut like cockerels outside the gates, but as soon as they entered the palace and saw the gold-livered footmen and the imposing guards in their silver uniforms, they clammed up. Tongue-tied they were, with every one of them barely managing to grunt a reply to the princess's questions. Like the foolish ladies in waiting, they nodded dumbly or repeated the princess's own words. But what does this have to do with Kai? Protested Gerda, finally getting impatient with the raven's long-winded ways. I'm coming to that, don't worry, the bird reassured her, but we must set the scene first. A storyteller must never leap straight into the main action, or the tale will be over in a moment. It was the 10th week of the contest. The princess by now was getting terribly bored of all these tongue-tied young men. She wondered whether the wedding she dreamed of would ever happen. The space outside the palace gates were still packed with carriages full of hopeful suitors with their retinues. Then one candidate arrived with no need for fancy carriages and footmen in livery. In he strolled wearing a plain coat and carrying nothing but a small cloth bundle on his back. His eyes were bright like yours, Gerda, and his hair was brown and thick and curling around his neck. It was Kai, shouted Gerda, unable to control herself. It must have been. The bundle would have been his sled. Well, cautioned the raven, let's not get too excited until we know for sure. What I do know is that the young man wasn't put off by the guards at all, and he told them he wouldn't want their job standing around in hot uniforms all day. He strolled straight into the palace, through the halls blazing with lights, and up the stairs. The servants were struck dumb at his nonchalance, and all you could hear was the squeaking of his boots. Why, it must be Kai, Gerda interrupted. His grandmother bought him new boots just before he left. I remember them squeaking in the kitchen. Humph, coughed the bird, not liking to be interrupted again. Well, they certainly squeaked. I heard that firsthand from my sweetheart. To continue, he fixed Gerda with one beady eye, daring her to interrupt again, but she nodded for him to carry on. The princess was sitting in the great hall in a chair made especially for the occasion, shaped like an oyster and inlaid with pearl. All her courtiers and ladies in waiting were there with their footmen and maids, were lining the halls. The young men walked through the crowds with not a care, smiling and nodding pleasantly at all who caught his eye. At last he stood before the princess. She looked radiant, her long golden hair washed and combed, her lashes fluttering above her sparkling eyes. If I weren't a raven right now, I might have... The raven broke off in a cough from Gerda. Yes, well, he continued, she looked splendid at any rate. There followed an hour of the most brilliant and witty conversation. Every remark of the princess drew a reply from the young man, usually embellished with a compliment. He was brilliant, reminded me a little of myself when I woo in my native tongue. Oh, I'm sure it must have been Kai, sighed Gerda, ignoring the raven's boasting. He was so clever. Did the young man do fractions in his head or draw diagrams? Not that I remember, said the raven hesitantly, not really sure what Gerda was on about. And did he win the princess? Asked Gerda. He did indeed, confirmed the bird, and they were married soon after and lived in the palace together and like each other very much. Oh, please, 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 please take me there, pleaded Gerda desperately. I must see Kai, and I'm sure he wants to see me. The raven hesitated. That's easier said than done, he reflected. Look at you. No shoes, grubby dress. I really don't think that you would be allowed in the palace. But if he knew it was me, Kai would never turn me away, protested Gerda. Yes, but how would he know that you were there? Asked the raven. Gerda could see that he was right and started to cry again. I'll tell you what, miss, said the raven, who hated to see the little girl whom he had come to like very much upset again. I'll have a word with my sweetheart. She often talks about ways of getting into the very secret parts of the palace that no one else knows about. Maybe she can help. Wait here, and I'll be back before dark. Gerda wiped away her tears and smiled at the raven. Thank you, she whispered. True to his word, the raven returned just before sundown. Thoughtfully, he had brought some more bread from the palace kitchen. My sweetheart sends you her warmest regards. She was touched by your tale and thinks that she can help. She can easily steal a key to the door to a little door in a walled garden. The key opens up the door to a secret back staircase, which will lead you directly into the princess's apartments, which she now shares with her prince. Gerda and the raven covered the short distance to the palace in no time. So keen was Gerda to see Kai again, instead of approaching the gate, they followed the wall round the back and waited by the small door until the palace settled for the evening. Gerda watched the last of the autumn leaves drifting to the ground as they fell from almost bare branches. She was nervous now. Was it very wrong to steal a key and creep into the palace like a thief? If it was only to find someone she loved, does that mean it was not a crime? Stay tuned for part 3.